The hum of voices, the rolling of suitcases, the constant ding of flight announcements. Chicago O'Hare International Airport was a symphony of movement, a place where thousands passed through every hour without a second thought. But for Sergeant Daniel Carter, this wasn't just an airport. It was a battlefield. He stood in line at security, gripping the handle of his duffel bag so tightly his knuckles turned white. He knew airports could be chaotic, but today, something felt wrong. His heart pounded. Too fast. Too erratic. The air felt thick. His vision blurred at the edges. Sweat trickled down his back, though the terminal was cool. Then, a sound. A loudspeaker crackled overhead, a clatter of metal from a luggage cart tipping over, and suddenly, he was back. The heat of the desert slammed into him, gunfire in the distance, the thunderous roar of an explosion, dust clogging his throat. He gasped, stumbling back into the present, but the past refused to let go. PTSD wasn't a choice. It was a hijacker in his own mind. People turned to look. A mother clutched her child's hand tighter. A businessman frowned and stepped away. Daniel clenched his jaw, forcing himself to breathe. Not here. Not now. "Sir, are you okay?" a TSA officer asked, already suspicious. His tone wasn't one of concern. It was one of control. Daniel tried to nod, but his eyes flicked across the crowd, searching for the threat his instinct screamed was near. Then he saw him. A man, tall, broad shoulders, sharp suit, calm, too calm, moving through security with ease, a rolling carry-on at his side. Something about him. It was familiar. Daniel's breath hitched. Recognition slammed into him like a freight train. A face from his past. A face that should be dead. His stomach lurched. No, it couldn't be. He had spent years hunting men like this. Men who built bombs. Men who killed soldiers. And now, one of them was casually walking through a U.S. airport, blending into the sea of travelers like a ghost among the living. Daniel's body acted before his mind could catch up. He lurched forward, heart hammering. "Hey, stop that guy!" he barked. TSA officers whipped around, startled. The suited man barely glanced back. "Sir, step aside!" Daniel ignored them. His hand shot out, pointing. "He's dangerous. You need to check his bag." People around him froze. A few stepped back. Whispers spread like wildfire. The suited man kept walking, only briefly glancing at Daniel before disappearing into the terminal. And no one stopped him. Daniel knew that look. It was the look of a man who knew he was getting away with something. His pulse pounded. His lungs tightened. No one believed him. But if they didn't listen soon, it wouldn't matter, because something terrible was about to happen. Daniel's breath came in short, sharp bursts. His mind screamed at him to act, but his body was frozen in place, muscles rigid with the weight of his past trauma. He wasn't in Afghanistan, but the feeling was the same. Something was about to go horribly wrong. The TSA officer was still talking, trying to get him to step aside, but Daniel wasn't listening. His eyes locked onto the suited man as he continued through the terminal, moving toward gate B-17. Daniel's gut twisted. He had to follow him. A hand gripped his arm, firm, insistent. "Sir, I need you to calm down." Daniel turned sharply, nearly knocking over Sophia Morales, the woman who had intervened earlier. She held her hands up in a gesture of peace. "You're not okay. Let me help." Daniel shook his head, trying to steady himself. "It's not me," he muttered. His eyes darted back to the gate, where the man in the suit was handing his ticket to the attendant. "I know that guy. He's dangerous." Sophia frowned, following his gaze. "Who is he?" Daniel hesitated, his military past colliding with his present. He wasn't supposed to talk about classified missions, about the men they hunted in the dark corners of the world. But this wasn't the battlefield anymore. This was home. And yet, the enemy had followed him here. He exhaled sharply. "He's a bomb maker, a ghost. We were told he was dead." Sophia's expression shifted from concern to alarm. "Are you sure?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "I'd bet my life on it." And if no one stopped him, a lot of other people might lose theirs. Daniel turned back to the TSA officer, urgency overtaking his fear. "You need to stop that man," he said, his voice deadly serious. "Right now." The officer, already annoyed with him, scoffed. "Sir, If you don't calm down, I'm going to have to escort you out of here." Daniel felt the frustration boil over. "Listen to me," he snapped. "I'm Sergeant Daniel Carter. I served 3 tours overseas. That man is dangerous. If you don't stop him, something bad is going to happen." The officer exchanged an uncertain glance with his partner. They had seen plenty of veterans break down in airports before, but the way Daniel spoke, the certainty in his voice, made them hesitate. Still, hesitation wasn't enough. Daniel turned to Sophia, his only ally. "You believe me, don't you?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "I don't know who he is, but I believe you believe it." Daniel grabbed her hand, urgency in his grip. "Then help me." They didn't have time to argue. He turned back toward the terminal, scanning the crowded airport for another way past security. His eyes flicked to an empty maintenance hallway, half hidden behind a security door. His old training kicked in. If they wouldn't listen, he had to act alone. Sophia grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" Daniel took a deep breath, stopping a bomb. And then he ran. The second his boots pounded against the floor, voices shouted behind him. "Sir, stop!" He didn't stop. Adrenaline flooded his system, sharpening his senses. He weaved through a group of passengers, slipping into the maintenance hallway before anyone could stop him. His chest heaved, his legs burned, but his mind was clear. The target was at gate B-17. 5 minutes, maybe less. Daniel emerged near the boarding area, hiding behind a row of seats as he scanned the crowd. The suited man was already at the gate, standing near a young woman holding a carry-on bag. Daniel's gut twisted. There were 2 of them. It was a bag switch. The woman would walk onto the plane with the real payload, while the man walked free. Classic move. He'd seen it before, overseas. His heart pounded. He had to act now. Daniel surged forward, closing the distance between them. "Hey!" he barked. The suited man turned just as Daniel grabbed his wrist, yanking him backward. Passengers gasped. The woman with the carry-on bag froze. For a second, there was no movement, just tension, coiled tight as a spring. Then, the man reacted. His elbow slammed into Daniel's ribs, knocking the breath from his lungs. Daniel stumbled back, but his military instincts took over. He recovered quickly, grabbing the man's suit jacket and throwing him against the gate railing. "Security!" someone screamed. The woman dropped the carry-on bag, trying to flee. Daniel didn't hesitate. He kicked the bag away from her, sliding it across the floor. A TSA agent finally intervened, rushing toward the chaos. "Hands up!" The suited man snarled, trying to twist away, but Daniel had him pinned to the ground. More officers flooded the scene, guns drawn. "Step away!" Daniel raised his hands, stepping back slowly. "Check the bag," he panted. "It's a bomb!" The word sent shockwaves through the terminal. A K-9 unit was already on the scene. The dog lunged toward the bag, barking aggressively. That was all the proof security needed. Within seconds, bomb techs were called. The airport went into lockdown. And Daniel? He sank to his knees, exhaustion finally hitting him. The suited man was yanked to his feet, handcuffed. His eyes met Daniel's, and for the first time, the calm mask was gone. There was fear there now. Daniel had won. FBI agents swarmed the scene, moving fast. One agent rushed toward Daniel. "Where's the second suspect?" Daniel's blood ran cold. The woman. She was gone. His head snapped toward the crowd of travelers, scanning for her. Then, he saw her. She was already halfway to the exit, blending in. Daniel forced himself to his feet, pushing past security. He wouldn't let her get away. With the last of his energy, he sprinted after her. She sensed him coming. Her pace quickened. Daniel lunged. His fingers snagged her coat, pulling her back. She whirled, her hand going to her pocket. Daniel didn't wait. He twisted her arm, forcing her to the ground. A small detonator fell from her grip. The crowd screamed. Daniel kicked it away just as TSA agents swarmed in, pinning her down. And then, over the loudspeakers, a calm but firm voice. "Security alert resolved. The airport is now secure." Daniel exhaled shakily. His hands trembled. The bomb had been real. He had been right. And no one had believed him. Until now. Daniel sat on a hard airport bench, his head resting in his hands. His heart was still pounding in his chest, the echoes of the last hour refusing to fade. He had stopped the attack, saved hundreds of lives, but the weight of it all felt crushing. Across from him, the The suited man and the woman were being escorted away in handcuffs, their faces blank, their mission thwarted. FBI agents surrounded them, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. The carry-on bag, now confirmed to have been packed with explosives, was being carefully dismantled by the bomb squad. Daniel closed his eyes, his body aching from the fight, his mind still battling the adrenaline. "Sergeant Carter?" He looked up. A man in a dark suit stood before him. FBI Special Agent Roy Dawson. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that Daniel hadn't seen from anyone yet today. Respect. Daniel exhaled, rubbing his face. "Just Carter," he muttered. "I'm not a soldier anymore." Agent Dawson shook his head. "You may not wear the uniform anymore, but what you did today, that was a soldier's instincts." Daniel let out a dry laugh. "Yeah? Almost got me arrested." Dawson smirked. "Almost. But instead, it got you the gratitude of a whole lot of people." Daniel wasn't sure how to respond. He had spent so long feeling like he didn't belong, like his experiences made him an outsider in the world he had fought to protect. But now, for the first time in a long time, he felt something different. Purpose. Sophia appeared beside him, offering a bottle of water. "You okay?" Daniel took it, nodding slowly. "Yeah." He twisted the cap open, taking a long drink before adding, "Thanks for believing me." Sophia smiled. "I didn't at first," she admitted, "but I could see how much you believed it. And that was enough." Daniel swallowed hard, her words hitting deeper than he expected. Nearby, the TSA officers who had brushed him off earlier were watching him now, their expressions guilty. The one who had been the most dismissive hesitated, then approached. Look, man," the officer started, scratching the back of his head. "I misjudged you. I thought you were just another vet having a breakdown. I'm sorry." Daniel studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Next time, just listen," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You might not get another chance." The officer nodded, looking properly humbled before stepping away. Agent Dawson clapped Daniel on the shoulder. "Listen, Carter, if you ever decide you want to put those instincts to use again, I know some people who'd be interested in talking to you." Daniel smirked. "I think I've had enough excitement for one lifetime." Dawson chuckled. "I'll hold you to that." As the flashing lights of the emergency response vehicles finally faded and the airport resumed its normal rhythm, Daniel felt lighter than he had in years. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as broken as he thought.